two, one, and go. Opening opposition, and based on how COPOI Joseph, closing opposition as well, I don't think debate very comparatively in this round. Reason number one, Joseph gives you many nuanced mechanisms on how this policy works and how all of the harms that LO just gave to you is not going to be so bad because we do have preventative mechanisms in order to combat it. He said that economic crises are terrible for the average person. People die because they can't buy food because their current job cannot sustain their living. And let's not be glib here, right? In order for governments to actually give you welfare services, they need money. Economic crises have no money. So opposition's proposal of just spending money is like telling the homeless to just buy a house. Reason number two, I want to break LO's main mechanism. Their counter proposal, TLDR, is to levy and limit the power of businesses and put it in the hands of the people. Let's break that and flip that in two specific ways. Number one, if the government has limited capacity to help in spending money because they have a cap on the amount of money that they're allowed to borrow, then you leave it to all of these businesses. And you leave it to all of these elites that LO spent 7 minutes shitting on from being able to actually help the average person because the government has limited the capacity in order to dole out all of these services that comes as a consequence of the debt that you're trying to take out. Like literally, that's the example of COVID that Joseph already gave to you. So all of the bad things that Elho talked about in his speech apply to him at the point in which the government has less of a capacity to actually enact upon all of its changes. Two, the average person really cannot vote on how and where the money goes to. As to the nuance that Joseph gave to you, it is really just the government that works on it, right? And even in the info slide, you can tell that the Parliamentary is the one that votes on whether or not we have a debt ceiling, right? So, the problem that Joseph already pointed out in his speech that I don't think LO even responded to is that those politicians are very bipartisan in their approach, and you will arrive at a deadlock at the point in which these economic crises happen. Note, economic crises are very volatile and are unpredictable, and you need that quick-paced, like a fast-paced approach in being able to actually deal with it. The more time you spend having a deadlock on the parliament is more time that people literally die. So, as a consequence of that, the policy wants to limit and wants to lessen the amount of people that get harmed from this by allowing that debt ceiling to be get ridden of so you can have more money for the government to spend on these particular services. Extension. On their counterfactual, because I don't think they debate and defend it very well, right? Why not disregarding the debt ceiling ultimately harms all of the minority groups and all of the underprivileged people that opening opposition seems to defend from getting the necessary welfare services that they rely on to survive. Two mechanisms to prove why this is true. Mechanism number one, the only likely action states have if they don't take up more debt is that they leave it in the hands of corporations and the private sector to try and alleviate average people from these economic crises. If the government doesn't have the money to help you, then obviously the only comparative choice that you have is in all of these private corporations. Why is this comparatively terrible? A, corporations do not have the same reach as governments. You literally help less people at the point in which you don't have this particular chokehold on the monetary supply. B, corporations are just far less accountable. If opening opposition thinks that, hey, all of these like the government is going to be very, very bad and very, very stupid about how it actually uses this money, then I would consider and I would posit that companies are going to be even worse as a consequence of them not being beholden to any stakeholders. They're not beholden to like democracy. They literally are private institutions in and of themselves, so they have no incentive to be benevolent. C, they have no guarantee of even succeeding. Note how many industries needed the money that the government gives them to survive when we did have COVID, when we did have all of those periods of economic crises. Why should you care, right? Firstly, The reason why you should care is because governments, on average, right, or at least comparatively speaking, are the most fair actor in order to arbitrate how much money is being spent and where that money is being spent towards. That is why it's probably okay when you raise the debt ceiling, given all of the mechanisms that Joseph gave you, as to how it's going to be the fiscal bank going to be the one to determine where the actual money is being spent, so as to combat all of the inflationary things that they are to us about, and why that's particularly terrible. But B, as to what Joseph already explained, inflation in and of itself is not a good or bad thing. It is just a thing that happens. So we can control that best on our side of the house when you leave it up to the government to decide for you. Mechanism number 2. The only people who have the political capital and power in times of economic crises are those who do have the wealth and influence to dictate where the market goes to. This directly responds to LO's counter policy, because if their counter policies in being able to have better donations to all of these private institutions, or to not have any control over the government and spend it on all of these private corporations, then we say the only people who can probably donate those money and only can contribute to all of these donations are probably going to be the ones who are rich, who are the elites. So it's like Obama giving Obama the medal to himself, because you really do only help those who do have the money in order to control it. Why is this particularly important? How do we weigh this? Firstly, I think we need to weigh this on just inherent trust, right? And on inherent incentive on who is the best actor to fulfill this. Because yeah, I get it, right? It's not perfect, but guess what? Economic crises don't have a one-size-fits-all solution. We understand the trade-offs that happen when you do have to raise the debt ceiling and you accrue more debt. Obviously, it's going to be bad in the short term. But if the comparative is, on the short term, yeah, you do raise up prices, but less people die and more people have money in order to actually feed and sustain themselves, then we do think it's probably going to be the right course of action. On their side of the house, it doesn't even happen because you limit the amount of money going into these private corporations. But B, at best, the only people that they help are those who already are being helped. They really only help those who are affluent enough. For all of those reasons, very, very proud to propose.